Do you like conversation on a variety of topics? Feel like no one wants to talk about the things that interest you? Tired of only hearing the same political, sports, or catastrophe talk? Yeah, we feel that way too. Join two high-functioning geeks as they discuss just about anything under the sun. We can't tell you what we'll be talking about each week because we don't know where our brains will take us. It will be an interesting conversation though, so hang on and join us. Here comes the relentless geekery.
Into our official time, we want to usually do so. Thanks everyone for coming. And what Relentless Geekery is about, we had a little bit of an introduction, is to talk about these things both current, because that's often of interest to people, but also we have been reading and seeing and doing and playing for a long time, and so we try to share those things. In particular for this session, with Lost Cities being the theme for the RG, we wanted to spend some time on that. Stephen and I have both traveled physically and in our minds any number of different places, and so we're going to try to use that as to what some of our cool experiences have been. But as you might imagine, it's not only have we really traveled there, it was kind of like geek travel, so Steve, do you have an opening, a thing that you can't wait to talk about? How did this topic strike you?
Well, where do we want to talk about places we've been to, and the geek things, reasons why, or are places that we still want to, but we've investigated?
I would say both. And also, as a quick, I know that we're doing it live and we're recording it and so forth. But if there's anybody that really has a wonderful contribution to make that they'd like to chime in with, please raise your hand. Please, if you have a dog, please make sure that they're currently not going to be taking us to Doggyville, that kind of thing. But so here, I don't know.
Let's start off. What's the most geeky trip you've taken to some exotic place? Maybe not even a city, but some exotic place.
So it's kind of, so a very good geeky place, for instance, is, and here's a quick frame. Colleen and I have been seeing state capitals all of our married life. We went to Bar Harbor for our honeymoon, and on the way,
so did I. My first time,
Montpelier, which is the smallest of the state capitals, and I kind of knew that from reading one of those trivia books. Well, we loved it. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's only like 4,000 people, but the capital itself is a perfect dome and a perfect big sidewalk with stairs leading up to it and perfect gardens, and it just was beautiful. And we kind of said, this is where every state kind of shows off, puts its best foot forward. Right. We should see all the state capitals. And from that throwaway comment, 2 days into our married life, 3 days in, we've now seen 48 out of 50.
You proposed again, right? Right on the steps.
And the reason that it's cool, I guess, is because it has proven to be that state capitals are beautiful, and often it's kind of a nexus in the state for what other things the state likes to show off. So it'll be, if it's a mining state, it'll be, here's some of the biggest mineral deposits and geodes we've ever pulled out up there in Wyoming. And if it's so where we've been to those various different things, it's also given us the excuse to travel all over the United States. And so it's amazing that besides the cool, relatively respectable state capitals, all you have to do is start hitting the Odd America sites, and you can find out, well, that's within 100 miles of the biggest ball of twine. That's within, the world's biggest freestanding gopher statue, or whatever.
Now you only mentioned the ball of twine because it's a Weird Al song. I know
it's a Weird Al song. And see, that's part of what Relentless Geekery is as well, is that, all of these polymath things hit that Weird Al he's like us. He sees a cool reference and he says, I'm just going to file that away so I can use it in a cool song later. And then all the geeks will say, I've been to the biggest ball of twine in Minnesota. So having said that, what's the coolest, geekiest thing? We were in New Mexico. And nice. They have very cool, it's a roundhouse capital. It's really beautiful, all kinds of art. But nearby is Los Alamos. And if you're looking for kind of a mecca for science tourism and geekery, Los Alamos is where the atom bomb was developed. And the people that gathered to do that, it was the A-team, right? It was the greatest hits of the mid-20th century. So Enrico Fermi is there, and they've captured it really beautifully. They have where they really lived and where those things really happened, and a whole bunch of wonderful history compressed into this area. And we were just loving reading every placard on the wall and seeing, like, they didn't only create the atom bomb. Here's what they played softball, because when you're under the incredible pressure, like, you're going to win the war if this works, and we're not if you don't, they needed to be able to blow off some steam. You know what I mean? So we
Now,
loved it there. Yeah.
now I haven't been to as many state capitals, but we live very, very close to Gettysburg. And for history buffs and geek nerds, it's just a mecca of so many cool and interesting things, not the least of which is my wife is very sensitive to otherworldly things. So we want to go back again and see if we can stir up some ghosts. I've talked a little bit about my Raspberry Pi project with the cameras and that. So we want to get some
to capture ectoplasmic photography. I mean, really?
Yeah. We want to go back and try some of that. So I think, travel as geek, it's not like, hey, we're going to go to this place and sit on the beach and go to the roller coasters. It's, hey, we're going to go and film ghosts in the middle of the night. I mean, that's where you start getting excited about it and people get interested as far as, we're concerned.
Right. Well, as you might imagine, I'm skeptical of all that kind of stuff, but I like going to places where, okay, if there is anything here, maybe there's like an Edgar Allan Poe spookiness to it. Maybe there's an H.P. Lovecraft spookiness. And it's never happened for me. I've never felt a presence in the room. I've never felt a chill hand touch me or anything. And so my personal experience and my skepticism is high, but still, I don't mind going to places that are supposed to be haunted, because I guess, why has it gathered all those stories? Is it because it's a suggestible place? There has to be a place that they want to share. Oh, this is spooky. You'll feel it when you go in there.
Well, we'll have to revisit this at Halloween, because I think right. With slightly different opposing viewpoints, I think we could have a lot to discuss it on both sides. I think that'd be great once again. One of the things I loved about Gettysburg, though, if you haven't been there in a while, they have this rotunda where they recreated in miniature the Battle of Gettysburg, and they do a little presentation, but it's speaking through the all around you, and then they have little flashes of light going off, and they light up certain areas as they're telling the story. So it gives it, while it's a model, it's not animated or anything like that, it gives it that sense of motion, and it gives it a sense of things happening, even though it's very static. And I liked it for the
smartly designed.
Yeah, cool. I enjoyed that more than I would have just some video presentation. It was, so I think that's a worthwhile trip, and we're 2 hours away from it, 3 hours away from here, or something like that.
One of the ways in which I would embrace the Lost Cities theme is I love going to a place where there's a sense of time. So, for instance, we've been to Dinosaur National Monument, and I know that the world isn't only 6,000 years old; it's 6 billion years old. And that when you go to the Grand Canyon, you can walk the path that it'll tell you these rocks are 150 million and these are 160, 170, right. And you really get like this carving by the Colorado River. It didn't happen in 2 hours. It happened over the course of millions of years. So when we were at Dinosaur National Monument, there's a place where you can actually, it's not only the exhibits within the cool hall, it's that there's still dinosaur bones, like in situ, I think, as they say, in the rocks. Right. And you can walk on a path and like, well, how cool is this? Imagine being the guy. So first of all, you can go back to hundreds of millions of years, but imagine just going back 200 years and being the first guy exploring around here and stumbling onto one of these bones and going, wait, what is this?
Yeah. Well,
this is not a bison. This is significantly bigger than any ox I've ever seen.
Let me jump in there with 2 comments. And this is totally different topics anyway. One, that's what makes me laugh when people say, oh, we're ruining the planet. No, we're killing ourselves. Once we're gone, the planet will recover because it's been here a long time and faced a lot of changes. And when they say, oh,
another layer on top of
we don't want to ruin this because that's the way it's always been. No, it's not always been that way. Anyway, but saying that also makes me laugh, but I'll forgive you. You're Lithuanian, but that 200 years ago, that still may not have been the first person to see that. The Indian and Native Americans may have been looking at it for 3,000 years or something.
That's right. So, and in fact, I often have thought that that's what, when you look at mythology, when you look at stories that are 10,000 years old, it's because those things were still be found and by relatively primitive peoples that they didn't have the language, they didn't have the concept of the way the world worked to be able to explain there were giants in those days, or there were gods, or there were, do you know what I mean? So just what you said, we Western explorers, Kit Carson wise, we're hardly the first people to have stumbled onto something that was beyond explanation at the time.
Right.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
really like ominous or awesome in the old way of like, wow, this really is kind of like godly. I don't know what to make of this.
Right.
So,
And, there's all those places they found hieroglyphs and they try and decipher them. And it's like, well, that just looks like an alien in a spaceship.
okay.
And so is it really, or is it some interpretation difference, or, so that's something, if I was going to explore, I'd like to go see. Because as we've talked, I've done some backpacking, some hiking in the mountains, and it's the weirdest thing to be on some trail in the middle of the woods up in a mountain. You come around a corner and there's half of a house. It's like somebody used to live here.
That's right. And we same thing. We love finding ruins like that. And in fact, to jump around a little bit, we love going hiking as well. And we've been to on one of our trips was Arches and Canyonlands. And it's a very interesting combination of, there have been people in various different settlements there for a long time. So, and maybe not, let me think how to say this. Utah itself is loaded with those kinds of things. So you can go to Mesa Verde, or and why is the name escaping me, where there's like, these are Indian ruins that were once muchly inhabited, but now they're abandoned. You go to even further back, a place called, if I remember right, like Newspaper Rock, where for whatever reason people regularly gathered here and they put on their primitive, if you will, cave drawings, but it's outside. And you think, wow, like they really did have, this is how they captured the hunt, this is how they captured the harvest, the wedding. And of course, modern hieroglyphics, someone had to put like, Al was here, and maybe Al plus Colleen in a
Right.
heart. We didn't, but you know what I'm trying to say. And then I was like, that's just so disrespectful that this thing was here for 10,000 years and they added this. But it's kind of like, in the big scheme of things,
right,
it's exactly the same moment.
So
you know what I mean?
here's a thought I had, and it leads to something we've talked about that goes with our theme. How about, okay, I was going to say like the Great Serpent Mound that we've got down southern Ohio
Has them,
Dayton.
Illinois has them, exactly. Yeah.
So you don't want people ruining that, but then you get stupid people that want to carve their initials in it. Well, all these kids are on digital stuff. Why don't they create an AR program to where you could snap pictures and digitally sign your name or stuff so you can put it up online, and then you don't ruin what's there.
Right. There's no destruction. There's only addition, if you will.
Right.
Exactly.
So
that's a very good idea, actually.
We talked about this before, that there are some places that you can do tours with VR or AR goggles on. And I think that's the coolest thing, especially for, of course, I mentioned to some people and they're like, yeah, whatever. So it's like, okay, so you're not a big geek.
Yeah.
But like Ravenna here, Ravenna's got a lot of history, like 150 years. And some of the buildings are still like the same construction. They haven't been demolished or changed. So how cool would it be to put on some goggles so I can see around me and I don't step into the street, but that it puts the buildings what they looked like 150 years ago, and I could see what those look like, and I could walk around, and with the technology we have, it would like dress everybody I walk by in clothes from that period.
Put a shell on them. Exactly.
Yeah. And then you click a button and now you're at 1950 instead of 1850. I think I
would love that myself.
Yeah.
In fact, not only would I love to experience that, but that's one of those things that I would love to be with the people that is a good enough tour guide that they're able to do. Let's walk you around here. And that in their mind, they can picture, okay, this is before motor cars. So here's where the hitching posts were. And here's where the watering trough was for the horses. And here, you know what I mean? Like they could, their ongoing description and pattern would create so much extra information and sense of place. It would be a really cool, immersive experience.
But it's also, if you got the goggles, we've got the tech, you could record it and it gets triggered by GPS coordinates. So it just tells you walk this way for, so many feet, and then it triggers another thing, and you could explore it, in different ways. You wouldn't have to take one guided tour. It could be wherever you go, certain things trigger.
Yeah. And think about that. If it wasn't Ravenna, which is 150 years, but if you took me to Troy and they said, here's what Pompeii was like, here's what Troy was like, here's what that they really did kind of take you back to. suddenly there are gladiators
Right.
in the arena. Suddenly there are, like the Senate is filled with Romans in togas debating the
Yeah.
issues of the day. That would be an amazing immersive
And with
experience.
the AI and getting 5G, you could have interactive NPCs that you're talking with, just like a video game.
Exactly. And just think of that. If at first you thought it was only like your um, let me think how to say this. You're watching, and then suddenly the thing started to interact with you. Some people would embrace it, and some people would be, whoa,
Right.
whoa, whoa.
Yeah.
I'm
So
like ghosts. I don't want this. I don't want people talking to me that aren't real.
right. So you mentioned Troy. More than likely, we'd get a spear through us then.
Exactly. Yeah. Any place where the word in the language for enemy is the same as for stranger, yeah, you'd be getting a spear in the
Right.
chest. Exactly.
And you mentioned Pompeii. Now, you were talking about how you got
We have
some of
not
the.
yet been there, but that's high on our
Yeah.
bucket list of,
Have
yeah.
you watched some of the shows that are on some of those new streaming services that you've been looking at?
No.
Oh man.
Are there this the kind of thing we're talking about where they're digging down and they're discovering in the midden, here's how they used to live and all that?
Yes, that
That's
Pompeii
very
has
cool.
been a hotbed lately for whatever reason, and they've discovered more bodies. They just discovered like a food vendor cart, and it still had the coloring on it and stuff.
Oh
And
man.
it
Because if
was
it
like,
got flash buried by ash, it really
yeah,
got amazingly preserved. See,
right.
that's very
And
cool.
they
Wow.
found these bodies, and they had made up. Here's what we think they are, but then they brought in teams that did X-rays and they looked into it and tried to figure out how old they were. And like one was someone carrying a baby, and
Wow.
and they found the one that they said, well, we thought this guy was such and such, but it turns out he was probably a servant carrying the household goods on his back.
Wow.
And they because of technology, they were able to find that out. But I guess like 100 years ago, somebody who discovered the bodies originally, they
Yeah.
wanted it to be exciting. So they literally paper mache'd it and put sticks in there to change their posture so they could make up a story and interest tourists in it. So
Okay.
they're using technology now to find originally how it should have looked and
Exactly.
been.
A more authentic
Yeah. So,
takeover. Okay.
we talk a lot about tech, and I think some of the cool things with tech is something like that, where because if you're unburying stuff and you're just using a sledgehammer and ripping it up, you miss some of the things. If those bodies had been destroyed even more, they wouldn't have been able to look at them now. So, it's really cool with the tech, like even x-rays, which are fairly old for
Yeah.
us now,
Yeah.
being able to look into these bodies that are basically, turned almost into stone in places.
Exactly.
So,
Here, I'll share this. Like I mentioned, when Colleen and I are getting ready to do one of our road trips, we love doing that because it's a very good combination of you're going to see a lot of the territory, but you can stop whenever you want to. And if you have a hotel that you're going to be staying at, you really could be on the road until 11 o'clock at night because you have a safe spot. So we've done things like the geeky part would be we're driving along and we're extending on doing something, and then we see mini golf, and we're like, we're suckers for mini golf because it's a very cool human ingenuity thing. You know what I mean? Like to see a little castle in the middle of where there shouldn't be a castle, it's
right.
mini golf. So that's kind of funny. But we also, as I mentioned, there's all kinds of fun guidebooks and websites. And I've always been one of those people that loves reading about that. And I have a little spreadsheet that's guiding our trip. And it's not only like where we're going to stay and where's a good place to eat, it's also, for instance, we've been to the geographic center of the United States and of the United States contiguous, United States including Alaska and Hawaii, and North America.
Nice.
And so Belfouche, South Dakota, is a very nice like national park center where they have all the state flags and they have an exact compass point thing where this is that place. You really are.
Take a picture.
You take a picture there, and I don't know this. Who knows why this is? Something about me with my symmetry or whatever. From this point, if I step in any direction, I'm heading towards the coast.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's kind of a cool concept. I love that. And when having said that, and how they really did it up in Belfouche, that was that was United States. You go up to the center of North America, and that's been Rugby, North Dakota. And where is that? It's a obelisk about 10 feet tall in a parking lot. And in that shopping mall, there's like a 7-Eleven and a nail store and I'm trying to think what the other thing was.
Hope the aliens don't visit there.
And it really was like, okay, we're here. Kind of let down, but we really made it to the center of North America. So that's including all of Canada. You just have to go from South Dakota to North Dakota. That's kind of cool, actually.
You know why the obelisk is there, though?
Why?
So that's where God can balance it when he is playing around.
So, Stephen, you are so much my perfect shill. I read a story on the Wikipedia site that said the reason that they found that the center of North America was there was someone took a map, like on wood, and they balanced it on their finger. And when they looked at it, it was perfectly balanced. It was within like 10 miles of where the real geographic center is.
That's pretty good.
How cool and smart is that? You know what I mean? If someone said, I can figure this out without, triangulating and exact, latitude, longitude. And so I'm always amused by, Enrico Fermi having been able to figure out the magnitude of the first atom bomb explosion because he threw some piece of paper on the floor and they're showing how much they jumped, and pulling out his slide rule, he figured it in within like 2%. And think of how smart you are to be able to say, what's the kind of rock that we're on, that the concussion, we're this far from the site. And anyway, I just, I love geeking it up like that. I'm trying to think what else we had. So geographic center, for instance, we went to the Hemingway house, which Ernest Hemingway wrote in Key West.
Did you get something to drink?
And, you can't help. Every bar around there has Hemingway's favorite cocktails and so forth. But this is very funny. One of the reasons I really wanted to see it was not only because it was Ernest Hemingway, because what is this house known for? Do you know this? It has polydactyl cats. Really? They had a tomcat that someone gave him as a gift that apparently was quite the successful Tom.
Was his name Genghis Khan?
I guess, exactly. And he was with every lady cat, to where now the entire population in the neighborhood, and especially in this house, are cats that have extra fingers, extra toes, whatever you call them on a cat. You know what I mean? And they have the run of the house. They're kind of a protected species there. And I know animals like me. They like how I sound and move and smell. And so knowing the cats like spooked and ran away, I was able to give all kinds of polydactyl cats like little scritches, and even like hold a paw and really see there really are six beans here. This is the coolest thing in the world.
So I don't know why, but Alan with polydactyl cats, that sounds like somebody needs to make a haiku of that. I mean,
I think it's named for a good rock band. Ladies and gentlemen, Alan and the polydactyl cat. Anyway.
Yeah, definitely. I haven't visited. We've got a couple on our list, like the Winchester House that we want to go see.
As a matter of fact. So does everybody know about this one? It's where the heir to the Winchester rifle fortune built this house that has all kinds of crazy rooms that go off, like walls that doors that don't go anywhere, things that are at weird angles and upside down and stuff, because she thought that the way to bring the spirits to rest of all those who had been killed with the Winchester rifles was continue to add rooms onto this house. Right. Is that's pretty right?
Yeah.
Thunder. Okay.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. But that's on our list to go to. Again, a supernatural element to it.
Absolutely. I will say this, in my mind, what I was picturing was the house like in Psycho, kind of nothing around it, up on a hill. It's actually California has kind of absorbed
encroached.
And exactly. And so like right across the street is a Taco Bell. Do you know what I mean? It's that kind of neighborhood.
Maybe the ghosts so that'll attract enough.
But it is very cool. Like as you're wandering around, you could see, man, if I didn't have a map, you could get lost in here so easily because things go off in no direction. And it's an unnerving place because it really isn't like, this doesn't feel even. And yet I don't know that it's true or not because they're unnervingly different than you would expect from a regular house.
So. Well, later this year, we've got plans for a couple writers conventions I'm going to go to. One of them's in Salem and one's in New Orleans. So
there's some interesting sources for tales and spookiness.
I already wrote one story set in Salem. So I use Google Maps and Street View. So I'm actually going to go visit the places that I wrote about in the story. And like one of them was a tattoo shop. And I'm going to go, by the way, is it okay if I use your tattoo shop in my story?
Yeah. I would imagine people would love to have that little bit of local color and that little bit of immortality by being mentioned in print. That's
because
cool.
because you mentioned Hemingway. Of course, my stuff's going to be quite as big as his. So yeah,
you just have to be really sparse in how you write. You got to get right to it.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
So I'm trying to think, like we.
Well, wait. So
Oh,
when we go to New Orleans,
yes.
we have, well, first of all, I want to visit the bar that they film with NCIS New Orleans, the one that Scott
Okay.
Bakula plays piano at, because I want to sit at the same piano that he has played,
See,
at least.
I like that where there's a place that's so famous, but you can really go to it. You know
Right.
what I mean? I've done that a couple times. And New Orleans must have multiple places. It's been in any number of
Oh,
movies
God,
where it's
yeah.
like, you know, the French Quarter itself is, you can remember where that was a scene, like there's a gun battle in this one movie, and that was exactly the porch they
Yeah.
were on, you know,
Right.
that kind of
Well,
thing.
I got a picture standing on Bourbon Street, so I was pretty good
Okay.
there before. But we
Yeah.
also found out about this bar, this pub that has literally been there for like 400 years or something like that. It's considered one of the oldest still standing
Operating.
places
Yeah. Yeah.
in the US. And so we want to go visit that. It's still mostly like it was then. They've had to do things to keep it up and reinforce it and stuff. But overall, it hasn't changed in the 400 years it's been there. So
That's very
that's
cool.
just cool that this thing has been around for so long in our country, at least.
Yeah, with that
You know?
same stew pot going. You
Yeah,
know what
yeah.
I mean? That they have
But
the same batch of clam chowder or whatever going.
right, you're talking about, the Coliseum and stuff. We don't have anything to compete against that, but
Okay.
this is at least something kind of cool.
Yeah. In fact, this is Colleen and I have done a little bit of literary tourism. You know, you're talking about places that you've read about in books and so forth. So Colleen has always loved the Little House on the Prairie books.
Right.
And so we've been to any number of Laura Ingalls Wilder sites where it's like, not only here's where she wrote the books, but this featured into the books. Here's the place where they weathered a really tough winter, and this pantry was exactly really the pantry where they kept the supplies that like helped them make it through where they weren't sure they were going to make it through.
Right.
And here's the schoolhouse that she taught right as a teenager or whatever. And so, and honestly, Colleen could speak wonderfully authoritatively on this, and I've been kind of along for the ride. But I love that sense of this is from 200 years ago, 150 years ago, whatever, and here it still is. You know
Right.
what I mean? They built sod huts to last back then, or whatever the reference might be. You know,
The one thing I remember from the Laura Ingalls books was I actually learned where the term horsepower came from, because they talk about it in the one book where they they hooked like 4 horses up and it was going around the spin move a something, I don't remember what, but
okay.
they actually said we hooked the horsepower up or something like that. I'm like, oh my God, that's right where
It's
the word came from.
exactly that. This horse could turn this mill for this so long.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. In
Yeah.
fact, when we've been to Biltmore House, one of the things we really loved was not only the opulence of where the Vanderbilts lived, but it was still a working farm up to today, and that they had actually had a whole bunch of early innovations like here's the perfect threshing machine. They had people actually designing. You know, I love things where nowadays, as we talked about with computers, you can do pretty much any simulation you want and bring things to be. Back then, you had to figure out if I'm going to run a machine over a field that's going to lift the plant up, take the important germ seed off, leave behind the chaff, you know, pick it apart so that I don't get it. The fact that you can see this thing with 100 moving parts and they all go and that they were so brilliant as to how they made that work off of a little gas motor. It's just the coolest thing. You know what I mean? And
Or even something manual by hand.
And that too. You know what I mean? That's you can turn a crank. For instance, was it Biltmore House? I'm trying to think where it was. They had fans, ceiling fans everywhere that through an elaborate series of belts and power, they had every one of these fans in the house turning off of one central power source, one central motor running, and they figured that out without being you're not going to you don't walk under it and worry about it suddenly going to snap and take your head off. They really were already then about what's the strength of our materials. They understood rubber, they understood wood, and the weight ratios of, and we're going to make it so that not only does it work, but it's like beautifully silent and moves the right amount of air so that even in this era before air conditioning, it didn't become unseasonably ridiculously hot in North Carolina. And so it's again kind of the lost cities in this case being that transport back to, we didn't get smart like in 1950 when computers were developed.
Right.
Human beings have been remarkably ingenious and creative for a long, long time, and I've always loved evidence of that.
And,
You know, so
and something I mentioned to you before, I don't know if you've caught any of these shows. Again, something cool with technology is there's a show, there's several like it, but the one I like is Draining the Waters. Have you caught that one?
you mentioned you wanted to talk about this, and so there's like
Yes.
things that were underneath, and now they're
Yeah.
being revealed.
Like the Colosseum of Rhodes, or the
Colossus of Rhodes, maybe
yeah,
the statue.
yeah.
Okay,
They the gate and the statues. They went diving underwater. They found pieces that they believe were part of this, and they
yeah,
scanned it from like 3 gazillion different angles. Then they compiled it and put it together in computers like a jigsaw, and then they put it up, and with basically an iPad, he held it up and it drew it on top of the landscape that was there, and you could see how tall everything was and how
right.
big it
To
was.
span the entrance to a harbor, how tall that
Yes,
had to be.
yes.
That's very
and,
cool.
and some of the
Yeah.
the columns and stuff are still there under the water, but no one can really get to them, and they're spread out.
Okay.
And even some of the items, they're worn, they're broken apart, they've moved, which is why they scanned so many things and then got it all pieced together. It's a
Exactly.
really cool show. Again, shows some really cool use of the tech.
Yeah.
And some of these new discoveries down in South America, especially, they're using the drones with lidar, and they fly over the jungle, and essentially they show it, and they'll show you very dramatically on the screen. Okay, now we're going to get rid of all the plants and vegetation. Zoop, and then it just shows what's under it. And
Exactly.
that's how they're
And that's where, like,
discovering all
so
this.
here's, the Angkor Wat type thing where
Yes.
this temple has been in the jungle for forever, and yet we didn't become aware of it until 1954 or whatever the real year was. And there's got to be those in the Amazon or in like impenetrable desert or underwater. And I know that I've seen that too, where they use satellite imagery to say, if we were trying to find out what the best possible place where ancient ruins would be, you look for where there's just enough difference in the shading of the earth that something probably was here. It got buried, but there's disturbances. Like you can look for graves that way. You can
Right.
look for old ruins that way. And I love that we are able to do such. In all that data that we're collecting, we found ways to process it to give us the next hints towards, let's find out where this mighty river once flowed, because it doesn't flow there anymore.
Right.
That's
and and Indiana Jones would really be a different person today. Wouldn't be as exciting. He'd be a hacker.
I read a ton of pulps when I was growing up. And so they're like they were very cheap magazines. They were kind of contemporaneous with comic books and predecessors to paperbacks, if you will. But one of the things that was fascinating to me about about pulps was the world was not a fully explored place. When you read Doc Savage or Operator 5 or any kinds of exploring the world type series, they really had not been in every jungle. They hadn't been, down deep in the ocean. They hadn't been in deep into the deserts. And so, again, to embrace the lost cities thing, everybody's heard of Tarzan, and the various different lost cities that he interacted with, the Jewels of Opar or whatever. Doc Savage had discovered a city in Central America that was a source of the gold that he used for his adventures in a fake country called Hidalgo, as I recall. But then as you read those things, it's amazing how many of those things that were only speculation, you come to find out, well, there really is a city like that. It just isn't exactly where they thought it would be, that there's a whole underground complex and they really did eat mushrooms to stay alive. Or there's like, where did this exotic creature go? All it has to do is stay away from humanity. And, as long as it doesn't suffer habitat loss, that's why we're still finding, didn't they just find a Tasmanian tiger for the first time when they thought it was extinct for the last 40 years or something?
There have been a couple things recently.
A couple things like that. And so I like, and that was the pulps, which was like, let's say 30s to the 50s. It's cool to read about what they were thinking the world was going to be like then. And then after a while, you start to say, okay, then they had satellites and then they had air travel and the world got smaller, if you will. But then once in a while, you read a story of like, here's this cave that has huge crystals in it. Have you seen this picture of a guy sitting amongst crystals that are as big as him? And they had never discovered it before.
Wow.
So there are still wonderful Indiana Jones level miraculous discoveries to be made.
It,
One of the reasons that we love going to the Banff Mountain Film Festival every year is because they keep on saying, so here's the world's biggest sinkhole. What's at the bottom of this? And then they'll like take you on a journey. And I love that kind of stuff. So
that is one of the things we always talk about, our love of technology and some of the great things it's doing. But that is one of the things I think it has harmed us a bit, is it takes away some of that sense of wonder, mystique. We don't use our imaginations as much. And visiting, doing these trips, visiting some of these ruins, some of the ancient cities, or even watching some of these shows and see, it sparks our imagination and our wonderment and mystery. Gives you a little bit of sense of that, the world, the universe really is big. There's a lot out there that we may not know. And it's funny you mentioned the pulps. That's the exact reason I read all the science fiction from like the 30s. It's that exactly. Time frame.
Yeah. And sometimes it wasn't only speculation. It was like, okay, we've discovered that there really are things that like fluoresce under ultraviolet light. And even they didn't understand fully how they did it. They started to speculate, well, how could this be used for spycraft? How could this be used? Is there like when they found out that aspirin did it, it was like, well, what's special about aspirin? Is it, and I loved reading some of those first uses of, now that we have jet planes, what will that do to have people that it used to take an ocean voyage of 2 months and now they can get across it in 6 hours or whatever else it might be. It's kind of like, as we approach teleportation, that was their first taste of, what if there's more than enough energy for anything? What if time is not a factor? How does it affect people, business, empires? It was very cool to have them speculate, wow, if war is fought on the basis of information and you start to have that someone has air superiority, meaning not only enough planes in the sky, but they have a perfect map of the battlefield and the other one has the fog of war, you know who's going to win. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's so I've always loved that kind of speculative stuff, I guess. And we have had really good luck with, when we're out on our journeys, it isn't even that we have to have the AR and the VR goggles and so forth on, just having a phone in your hand, where I think I might have mentioned the story. We were driving down to Marietta back and forth because Colleen had a couple clients down there. And we love those brown signs along the ways that say there's a point of interest. We saw the big musky bucket. And it's like,
yes,
what the heck is that? Is it like so my speculation was, all right, there's streams that come together and they kind of have a perfect breeding ground for muskies, fish. And so the bucket is this like basin, if you will, where there's a lot of muskies.
Right.
Nope. You look it up on your phone and you find out that Archer Daniels Midland, long ago, when they were doing clear cutting to be able to do mining, they had huge earth moving equipment. Huge. like house big, not quite city big. Well, there were some things that were so big that after you were done with it, the amount of money that it would cost to clean up after yourself wasn't the best economic decision. So the big musky bucket is one of those big shovel jaw things from a big earth mover that they just decided to leave behind. And how big is it? They have like a photo of the local high school's marching band all fitting into the big musky bucket.
Right.
That's how big it is. So, but I love the fact that instead of just seeing that sign and saying, who knows what that is? One day we'll go exploring. When we read about that, it was like, oh, we got to see this. This is the coolest thing in the world. And we have had extraordinary luck with driving along and going, wait a minute, I always loved Louis L'Amour when I was growing up reading all those Westerns. This is where he wrote them? Yeah. And we go and see the Edgar Allan Poe place or the Louis L'Amour place. And we've, again, had very good luck with the whim, because of being able to like do a little bit of research beforehand, or just be sitting there at a subway and look over and say, what are those big green legs over there? And you find out that it's the Jolly Green Giant statue. It's like, we didn't have that on our radar, but we're game. And so I love the fact that between technology and our sense of curiosity, like, and it's kind of funny, I don't mean to keep pounding on the lost cities thing, but I think that's what you have to have, is a sense of curiosity and exploration. And I wonder, what does that mean? What's over there?
Yeah.
There's another hill to go over. There's another corner to go around and do a little more exploring.
Still being able to see the world around you with that wide-eyed stare.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a story. It's not my own. I believe it was in Stephen King's On Writing. Him and his wife were out. I don't remember the hotel off the top of my head, but they stopped at a hotel earlier in the day, he had this idea for a story. He wrote it down on a napkin, shoved it in a pocket, and he couldn't get it out of his head all day. So he got out of bed middle of the night and went to the desk clerk and said, "Hey, is there someplace I could write for a couple hours?" And the guy pointed him this back stairwell on like the second floor landing between, or not the floor, but like the little area between landings. There was a desk and it was just right there. And he said, "Go ahead and use that." Supposedly it was the desk that Rudyard Kipling died at while writing. And Stephen King was like in awe, like, "Oh my gosh, really? This is the desk I'm going to sit at and write."
Man.
But I wonder if they still have it there, because obviously it had been there for a long time. That's, like you said, one of those little things you may not plan it, but how cool is it that Rudyard Kipling not only sat and wrote at this desk, he died here. That's, again, supernatural, a little weird. But it's those little things. I tell the kids all the time, you guys are not building a life and a story by sitting in your bedroom watching videos. What are you going to tell people? "Oh yeah, the one day I really stubbed my toe bad." Where you could say, "Well, we stopped at this hotel and I wrote something sitting at the desk that Rudyard Kipling wrote at."
Was also at, exactly.
And it's not like paying $100 to go to a roller coaster park. It's at a hotel on a landing, because people don't give it as much care, and that's sad in many ways.
Colleen and I, one of the reasons that we are a very good couple is, first, we can't hear a mention of Rudyard Kipling without one of us saying to the other, "Do you like Kipling?" "I don't know. I've never kippled." So anyway,
there's probably 4 or 5 people saying that.
Of course, but for those who hadn't heard it, I had to inflict it on you. I'm sorry. We're both very game. Like I said, our favorite vacations have been our driving vacations, because we've had such luck with the coincidence of, let's check that out. Why not? And it turns out to be, there's a cool dinosaur skull in the back of a library or something like that. Like, for instance, we went to Punxsutawney, and it wasn't February 1st, and so we weren't expecting to see the reading of the weather and stuff like that. But while we were in Punxsutawney, they said, "Well, you know where they are in the off season? They're over there in this library." And it wasn't just Punxsutawney Phil; it was Philomena, because they have to keep making more Punxsutawney.
Right. It's like the Jolly or the Dread Pirate Roberts.
Like that there's an inheritance that goes on there. But it was very cool to see. Here they are. I mean, these are really the authentic, famous from Groundhog Day movie. And it's a very comfortable little terrarium of a place. They've got all the vermiculite they need so they can build their little nest and do, groundhog things. But it was just very cool to be, and we actually really love that. Some part of how we've had very good luck is we tend to not go when everyone else is there. We don't travel in the summer when the families are there and everybody is like, "Oh no, there's more crowds and litter and noise and whatever else it might be." By traveling in the collar seasons, you can go and see things and have kind of a more personal experience of it. And also, the people that are there that really are the knowledgeable, interesting caretakers, they're so happy for company. So we went to, like I said, state capitals. We're in Des Moines. We find out that they have apparently a very nice library. Well, we turn like the corner to go down the hall to the library, and the library doors are like 2.5 stories tall. Okay, you're hoping this is going to be really cool. You open these doors, and it's like the doors to Oz. Like everything outside was black and white, and it's the most beautiful library you can imagine. It's like 6 stories tall, and It's got the spiral staircases that go up amongst endless shelves, and it goes off into the distance, and all this like cool stuff. And if you're a library lover, it was just beautiful. Like, all of a sudden you want to get quiet, because you're like, this is just like a church. This is a cathedral of learning. It's the coolest thing. Well, we walk up and say, we love these kinds of places. And because we were there, the only people there, they said, "Would you like to see some cool stuff?" It's like, yes, we would actually. So they take us and they open up the secret bookcase and open it, and you could step out onto a balcony where, from you're looking at the Capitol and the library building from the outside, there's a frieze of various different godly figures in concrete that are all standing there. Well, you're on the balcony behind them, so you're looking out of the armhole from underneath the guy with his arms akimbo over the Capitol grounds, and I don't know, what did we get? 1 out of 1,000, 1 out of how many people even know that exists, much less get the cool tour of it.
Yeah.
And we've just had, I never mean to talk too much. We've had such good luck by just being a little bit of talk to the people that are there, show that you're interested in fun and cool, and they like, would just that we'll give you the special tour of the cave. We'll
they
give you the
usually
special
love
tour of the
what they
library.
do.
Yes, it's just, and I don't know, and we don't look like desperados. We're like standard.
Well, everybody wears
couple.
a mask now, so
that's right too.
I've had that argument with my cousin because a lot of times I'll pull up the GPS and I'll turn off, don't put me on toll roads. And he's like, well, that's going to take 40 more minutes. Well, no, it might actually take an extra hour or two, depending on what I see on the way. Yeah. And there was a place out west I stayed at. It was a campground, but it was like Jellystone. It looked like the Flintstones. It had a car, it had houses, it had a dino slide. It was made to look like the Flintstones. Mm-hmm. The kind of weird thing is, I saw in the news a couple of years ago, it had been closed and abandoned, and they were getting ready to like get rid of it unless somebody bought it. And I'm like, oh man, it's just that memory of being there, and now no one will get to do it, but that was one of those weird little things, you're in the Flintstones city.
Exactly. It's, I wonder how much, of course, COVID-45 has had all kinds of impacts on restaurants that couldn't stay open, all kinds of places. I wonder how much like a family campground like that depends on a certain amount of tourist business, and then tourism shut down for a year. I sure hope that enough of them are going to be open, or at least they were preserved, that they didn't just like the rain got in and now everything is destroyed. I really would love it to be that this wasn't a destructor.
Because we go camping quite a bit. A lot of them were actually open last year, but there were rules that you had to stay within your camp area. They had the store closed, they had the swimming pool closed, they had the playground closed, stay in your area.
Anywhere where you could be part of the swapping.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So of course then everybody starts drinking, so that went out the wayside. Do we want to see if anyone else has anything? Any places they've been?
Exactly. Any contributions or any questions? Part of doing the cool live podcast is it's not just Stephen and I. Anyone? Colleen, what's been your favorite experience that we've done? Do you have not even favorite? Any cool, memorable thing that I have neglected to mention?
I'll say one thing about doing 48 capitals. In 48 capitals, we have never once seen a governor at work in his office.
And that's true.
You should have taken pictures of 48 empty governor chairs.
Empty seats.
Yeah.
That would have been a collection. You could have done a book, put a picture book out.
We have, because we've often been there. Like, it's kind of funny, all kinds of states, they don't have their officers, their representatives in session the entire time. So a whole bunch of New England states, it really is like they're in session maybe 3 months out of the year, and then they're like fixing and able to tour in the meantime. So we could go right into the cool house chamber, and I was able to stand at the main speaking lectern and orate. You know what I mean? So we have all kinds of cool pictures that didn't involve pushing a senator aside. We just kind of got to have the run of the building. And again, maybe because we're not, like little kids running around, maybe spilling inkwells or spilling ink or something like that. They all seem to let us be okay everywhere but New Jersey. New Jersey really was like, what are you doing in here? It's like, wow, we're touring, we're tourists.
Well,
that's really suspicious.
That's funny, because the one thing I remember about New Jersey through all the different travels I have done is when you fly into New Jersey, they're saying, okay, we're coming down to our descent. And you still have like 40 miles or something like that. Okay. And you look out the window, and for the whole 40 miles, it's all tract housing. So that's right. My impression of New Jersey. It's just like, I don't know, I'm done, I think.
Yeah. In fact, it's funny, before we were, Colleen, of course, knowing that we were going to be doing this conversation, one of the things she wanted me to mention was, so there we are, Dinosaur National Monument. And as usual, they have park rangers there and so forth. We were having a wonderful conversation with the lady who was the answer woman. And we talked about, we had taken the walk and seen the bones and all that kind of stuff. And one of her great comments, that is pretty much our life is, if you're bored in this world, you just don't So
You're
I'm
not paying
you're
attention.
not paying attention.
Yeah.
Exactly, because there's wonder to be found everywhere. A little Calvin and Hobbesy sounding. You know what I mean? Like, just
That-
if you just take a walk and you don't appreciate it, it's spring, these things are blossoming, or here's, what made this whole, you know what I mean? There's, when we're in the middle of Saguaro, so, National Park, and they're like, wow, this really is like a little owl or an ocelot or something lives in this cactus here. And all the different ecosystems that we've seen and the different scents. When you're in the middle of a deep pine forest, it's just so calming and so ancient in a way. It smells like this place doesn't, what you were saying, this place doesn't require any humans. This place was doing just fine.
Yeah.
You all died off.
Well,
You know what I mean?
I have a relative, and I'm not going to mention names. It's not Dan or so, but that I go to places with, and like at Hale Farm when they do the Civil War reenactment was an
Okay.
example. We
Yes.
went there, and I'm like looking at everything. I want to touch what I can. I want to read stuff and all of that. This particular relative, like, whoop, whoop, whoop. Okay, well, we're done. Let's go get something to eat. And I'm like, Are you kidding me?
Really? I'm just starting to read
Yeah.
all the placards.
Yeah,
There's a whole bunch.
It's not that okay, well, I'm here, great, mark it off the bucket list and leave. It's like I'm embracing it, I'm enjoying it. What it
Yeah.
opens at 8, so let's get there at 8. Yeah, Ray, hold
It
on.
reminds me, I've been in art museums where people are taking pictures of the art.
you know, we've been on a hike where someone came up to Colleen and said, "Look at this cool picture I just took." And it was like, "You mean the view out that window right over there that I can see and absorb and love?" So it is an odd thing that things only get like real when people capture them nowadays instead of their sensory capture,
and
if you will.
I don't think it's Hemingway. I forget who it is, but isn't there a poem, something about taking a seashell off the beach and how it reduces its magnificence and glory by putting it on a bookshelf? I saw a poem. I'd have to look it up again. It's been years.
That's a very nice sentiment. We tend to never do that. You know what I mean? We have our memories and we take pictures of everything because we love to have the memories be the trigger for remember where we were on Harney Peak. What is Harney Peak's distinguishing feature? It's the tallest point in between the Rocky Mountains and the Apennines in Europe. Like, not the Appalachians or the Adirondacks. And so it's one of those, you can walk all the way to the top. And then there's actually a little a structure on top where you can take a ladder up and you can be like the highest thing and get the entire vista looking all the way around. And I think now I just read that it's now not going to be called Harney Peak. It's going to be called Black Elk Peak because it's another one of those places that is, if not sacred Indian land, it's very much in the Black Elk wilderness, which we wandered through by reading the map wrong. Let me just mention that. And so that's where I almost like got hypothermia and Colleen saved me. But the fact that like, what a cool artifactal fact is that?
Yeah.
I'm on the highest thing between the Rockies and Europe. You know, I mean, that's a really cool thing.
You're taller than Colleen, so she didn't even get that distinction to be able to say that.
I was the tallest thing in South Dakota at one point. You know what I mean?
Now, I love that they changed the name, but at least it wasn't something like, Walmart Point or something like
that's
that.
True. Boy, what if someone had bought the naming rights?
Yeah.
Exactly that. This is going to be Chipotle Park. No,
Yeah.
So we, another thing that we've, and bear with me, I had a thing I wanted to mention. Sorry, I'm lost it now. Another one of those fun coincidences. Where were we? I'm sorry. I'm blanking. There's a good one too. Oh, we had one of the after we had talked about, we're at 48 out of 50 state capitals. We only have Alaska and Hawaii to go to, and then we've been talking about like what's an interesting next goal. Do we want to see all the highest places in each state? Is there anything we should extend, of course, outside of the United States? And where do we want to go? And one of the things we talked about was doing like an Objects of Power tour. Like, don't you want to see the Books of Kell? Don't you want to see the crown jewels? Like, we were in Austin, Texas, and only when we were there did we discover that they have a Gutenberg Bible at the University of Texas.
Wow.
We did not get a chance to see it. But Gutenberg Bible. I mean, that's like the start of movable type. That's the start of knowledge.
Now if they actually had
in a very like everybody can get to it way, instead of only the upper echelons,
right,
and the priesthood and the scientists. You know what
Texas.
I mean?
Now, if they had a working Gutenberg press, now that would be something cool, and still printing off Bibles. You know, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah. But it's I love the fact. So having said that, so we were at the annual gathering in Boston, and we've had there's two quick stories here. At one point when we were doing we did a loop from the annual gathering in Portland that we went like to Yellowstone and back around. We found ourselves in Spokane, Washington, and it's like, okay, it's a cool big city, but I don't know much about it. I often get the alternative newspaper. That's where they have the cool music and comedy and restaurant listings. And we find out that there is a Leonardo da Vinci exhibit at one of the local museums. And like, well, he's only the most Mensa of Mensans ever. He's the incredible polymath of all time. He just knew everything and did everything. And so you go to this place and they have artwork of his, and like, not only from his codices where they have the pages where he designed things, they had created the things that he had designed. So here's the first image of what could be a submersible. Here's a perpetual motion machine. Maybe you didn't get that one exactly right, but the fact that you were just in the middle of this room full of genius and totally unexpectedly. And I love the fact that if I hadn't happened to pick up that magazine and we were like, before we leave town, we're not missing this. We're going here.
That's one of those little things that people miss.
And so similar to kind of tie this all together, we were in Boston. We read about that their local museum there has there's a copy of the Magna Carta there. And there's a copy of a working version of the Constitution and of the Declaration of Independence where they had like margin notes. You know, those things didn't spring from
little doodles.
One brilliant person's mind. Yeah. They had to like hammer them out between many discussions between brilliant and stubborn men. And so you walk into this place and like, here's the Magna Carta, which is in Latin. And so they have the translations of it. But then you see like, here's the translation of the first time that it says a man has the right to face his accusers. Like these things that are incredible bedrock foundation things for how the rule of law works. And that they were, was it 1216? I'm sorry that I'm an idiot. I don't know this exact. What was it again?
Right.
1215.
1215.
Oh, you're off.
That's pretty good. I was pretty close. But like to be in this room and things are like humming with power. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you don't believe in the supernatural, Al. Come on. But you just said that.
I didn't feel Benjamin Franklin's presence there. It just was how formative, how beautiful that these things have survived time. From what I understand, there's like a dozen Magna Cartas that can go around the world. They have some tour and some stay in state, but that they're, they made copies because when it was first done, the agreement forged between King John and all the barons, they had to send that word out to the land so that we would know there's a new state of laws here. And so the fact that those have survived for 800 years is very cool. And then of course the very particular American things, like to see. So is that like, James Monroe's handwriting in the margin there? It's just very cool to again get that cool sense of history and of contribution and of connectivity. Oh, I don't know. I didn't want to leave.
Yeah,
really
that would be cool.
Oh my God, it was beautiful. So,
well, here I got a small trip for you, and it's pretty close to Dayton. If no one's been there, cross the border, go over to Point Pleasant, West Virginia. That's where they have the Mothman Festival every year, and they have a giant silver Mothman statue. So you can go get your picture with it. It's very
large.
One
of those ones that there's been many sightings, and it's like it's kind of unexplainable. And so, but I don't know. I've been to Metropolis, Illinois. Like it's kind of funny. And I don't mean to be the shill. Tomorrow I'm doing a talk about comic book lost cities, and Metropolis is Superman's home, but there really is in Metropolis, Illinois, and they really do have a statue of Superman there. And they found a very interesting balance between not just cashing in and having, here's your Superman corn dog and here's your Superman bath towel, that instead they actually have fun with it and reverence for it, and they've, as a small town, managed to kind of make it entertaining.
Well, hey, I would go.
So yeah, it's really cool.
Well, speaking of the corn dog, right down the road from this giant silver Mothman statue is Hillbilly Hot Dogs. Okay, now I've not been there. It's on our list.
But, is that made out of like varmint meat? Like you don't know what's
in
there?
Let's put it this way. We were driving by and we look over like, wow, that really looks like someone's going to come out with a chainsaw and kill us. There's like people on the porch, but I wonder if they're like looking at us, sizing us up. There was a car stuck on a pole, and we went, "What the heck?" And then we saw a sign that said Hillbilly Hot Dogs. I literally like had to stop the car. I'm like, "That's a serious restaurant." I thought it was like some rundown shack.
That's hilarious.
And what's his name? Guy Fieri from Diner Drive In the Dive. He's been there, so he didn't die.
There wasn't like banjo music in the background and you were spooked or anything like that.
That's the first thing we all did. We all started going
exactly, because the guy's on the porch. He's right there.
Yeah. But they really like make it as hillbilly as they can, and they embrace that. So there you go. You got to add the Mothman statue and hillbilly hot dogs to any travel list.
Yeah, that's sorry. The one of the things that we've noticed is a lot of the guidebook. I'm trying to say this. If you look at photos and fromers, they'll have important stuff. They'll have historic and et cetera, et cetera. But for instance, we've been to the Frank Frazetta Museum. You know what I mean? I really love his artwork. You would have seen it from like the, Molly Hatchet cover, a whole bunch of creepy and
Conan
60s covers, Conan the Barbarian, exactly that. And there's actually his son runs a museum in the wilds of Pennsylvania. I think it's like kind of towards, so where's the Baseball Hall of Fame?
Cooperstown.
Cooperstown. Thank you very much.
Right.
It's like kind of heading towards there. And we had a wonderful time because again, we were there like midweek. No, and it was a Monday. It was not supposed to be open. We were in our hotel, and I called over and said, we drove all this way to see you guys. And he goes, "Hey, if you buy something from the gift shop, we will turn the lights on and open up." Well, then because they weren't supposed to be open, we kind of had Frank Jr. and his wife to ourselves, and they just gave us the most delightful family tour. Not only, of course, of the artwork, but like him sharing stories about his father.
Nice.
And a little known fact about Frank Frazetta, he actually had a big heart attack, a stroke, and he learned to paint with his left hand, having been right-handed all of his life.
Wow.
So much that he could create things that were still really good Frazetta artwork. And like, think of how your mind is that mighty, so artistic are you that you can use your offhand and still create things of beauty. I mean, my offhand looks like I'm 5. You know what I mean? It's all stick figure terrible.
My dominant hand looks like that.
Really, I guess me too. I mean, it's not that much different actually. One of the reasons I love doing crossword puzzles is because I can do it in all caps and I can handle precise lettering like that. My cursive looks like, oh boy.
I've always said that's why God invented word processors
to get rid of my bad handwriting for being how my paper always got marked down or whatever.
The only thing I look like a doctor is I may not be a doctor, but I write like one.
Yeah. One of the things that Colleen and I are talking about doing when we're in retirement is we love not only doing this kind of travel, but there's various different cities that have wonderful concentrations of cool stuff. And so you don't want to go there for a weekend. You want to go to Washington, D.C. for like 2, maybe 3 weeks, and every day go to the Capitol and the all the various, like I want to go to the Museum of the Mint. I want to go to the Spy Museum. I want to go to the Newseum. I think that actually just closed, which is so unfortunate. But just by getting into Toronto, for instance, once we got like the city pass and we were like, let's go to their Natural History Museum. Let's go. We have this vision of probably a dozen different cities where Philadelphia has lots of history. So does Boston. So does Washington. Let's go to San Francisco, and they have, and let's go like Florida has. Why in the world do they have a Salvador Dali museum? But they do, and they have a comic book museum. And so, what a cool combination! And there's a Chihuly glasswork exhibit. And as you do a little bit of these things, you start to find those concentrations, those nexus. It's like, I kind of want to go there and not see as much as I can in 2 days and rush through everything. Right. I want to take a week and know that if I find a place really wonderful, I'll go back the next day and capture all the stuff that I didn't feel like rushing through. And so I think we're going to become that we're going to have to learn how to, alarm the house well enough that we can be gone for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. And right now, of course, what's our best alarm system? Our house's appearance. You know what I mean? We don't look like, hey, bust in here and there's treasure. We look like your standard Midwest. Yeah, we've already been hit. Exactly.
Well, do what we do. Just live out in the boondocks where all your neighbors' houses look just as bad. Nobody wants to drive out there and bother.
Slim pickings when you get out, off of 59 or whatever like that. But I I think that that's a very cool idea of, there's so many cool things. I know you go to, and it's not only like the United States history in Philadelphia. Isn't that also where they have like the Mutter Museum of Birth Oddities? Is that the title of it? You know what I mean?
Really? Yeah.
It's, and like, I don't think
Medical
I'm a
oddities.
master medical oddities. Thank you. I'm not a master of the grotesque, but the fact that somebody put a whole collection of carousel horses or medical oddities or mustards, or I just love, we were down in Marietta and went to a dollhouse museum, and it was like the most Shirley Temples that I've ever seen in one place. And it's kind of cool, the overwhelm of it and the obsessive nature that led to that thing being collected over the course of time, and they put it into a nice environment so you really could enjoy it. Sometimes I guess it can be a little bit weird if it's a little cluttery or whatever, but I like to honor people that this is their life's work. That's really kind of a cool thing, even if it's a little obsessive. Like I said, there's still something about that that's I like to, I don't know, acknowledge that the work they did not go wasted. I'm there. I'm seeing
Well,
it.
that made me think of the Motown Museum up in Detroit.
Okay.
That's another, obviously Motown had a bit of an impact. And
absolutely,
there was an amazing bassist, James Jamerson, that played every time you hear a Motown tune and it's just got this really kick-ass bass line, it's probably James.
It's that guy.
Exactly. And then the Henry Ford Museum, where I almost got arrested.
What
because,
did you do that would have brought that about?
Well, let's just say they put the barriers between you and the car that Kennedy got shot in for a reason.
There you go.
So we'll just say that.
Whereas you can go into the bus that Rosa Parks refused to move to the back of the bus and
that's
sit
cool.
in her seat, and tell me that's not an object of power. Tell me that's not a place of power.
It's
very cool to be there for that. Yeah. So yeah.
Well, heck, I live 8 miles from Kent State, and there's still a sign that has a bullet hole in it from that shooting. So I mean, I've been like an inch from it. It was like, well, I could stick my finger in it and touch it, but I almost didn't want to. It didn't feel right,
It's like I said, we've had such good luck about that. Like going to the Ford Museum, I wasn't sure what we'd be getting into, but then you'd be like, wow, this really is the bus. It's not like a recreation. It's not. And at other places we've been, sometimes, as you know, history isn't pretty. So you'll find, here's the gun that was used. Here's the dog that was set on somebody. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's Balto, where here's the dog that brought diphtheria medicine and saved a bunch of people. So it's worth seeing that capture of history, I guess, no matter where we've been. Anyway, we went to a cool place in Oregon that was like the Oregon Trail Museum. And a little bit of what you made mention to earlier, it's all static dioramas, but they really captured what it would have been like to be going through the Badlands, where you had like 2 sets of clothing and you had to like wash them and alternate between. You didn't have a wardrobe. Here's the it really had a great sense of, this was not easy. Pioneers really were amazingly hardy people. You know what I mean? And to have done this with, like, we don't know what's at the end of the trail. We hope we'll be able to get land, build a farm, create a new life. But that amazing either optimism or desperation that led people to be Sooners or Oregon Trail people or California Gold Rush people, that's kind of much of how the United States got built. When we've been at the Lewis and Clark Museum, it really was kind of terra incognita all to the west, and you're only in like St. Louis, you're in Jefferson City, as I recall, right? The whole west was still to be found. That's kind of cool,
Yeah. So the Oregon Trail Museum, did they like show all the people that died of dysentery?
They had references to that it was, this many people didn't make it. You know what I mean?
This is beyond your time, but I don't know, about the very
video
popular
game. That was a standard way to die in the Oregon Trail. One of the very earliest, exactly. So computer games, not a video game, a computer game. Exactly.
Yeah, kid, and heck, that thing still comes back. You can get it on iPad, and they just released a new version, and they're making a cartoon now or something.
Right. Just like Zork. You know what I mean? Zork's text adventure. It never goes away. It gets repackaged.
Yeah.
One thing I remember about the Oregon Trail Museum, do you remember this, Colleen? It was on the top of a hill, and it was so windy that you were getting pushed around. Mm-hmm. And that was a big capture of. So imagine being in that kind of wind across the prairies for days on end, just getting the dirt and dust is getting into everything, and you can't really catch your breath, and you can't even like yell at each other because the wind carries it away. And it was very, I guess it was an unexpected on their part, or unintended, maybe is a better way to put it. Like, wow, I'm really experiencing a little bit of what it would be like to be like, you're naked to the elements. You really could die out here.
And you could still go back to a car.
Right. So, okay. I think we might have done our hour. Is that correct?
No,
do we have any other
never
contributions, questions?
I have one thing.
Yes, please.
So, Stephen, you mentioned at the beginning about Alan needs a haiku about. I'm gonna put one in the chat.
Okay, great.
Polyactive that. See if that worked.
You are the sweetest. Oh my God, I'm so lucky to have married you. Thank you
awesome.
very much, my love.
We'll have to post it on the website. We'll have to make shirts out of it. We're always talking about all the shirts we should make.
Counted correctly.
I did see a reference to haikus are one of the few art forms where you're not just enjoying the art of it, you're always counting to make sure they got it right.
we need to get Relentless Geekery t-shirts with that haiku and a six-fingered cat.
There you go. Exactly. A little with the beans out, not the claws, because they were my total friends. They were so cuddly. It was and honestly, so I'm sorry, everyone. We have been mostly paying attention to faces and noises and stuff like that. There have been some very nice contributions to the chat thing that we didn't really bring up. So thank you very much for the Black Elk Speaks reference. Thank you to somebody else who has been to the Big Muskie Bucket, someone that grew up near Winchester House in San Jose. Honestly, I feel bad for now not having pulled people into discussion, and thank you for the contributions, but thank you very much. It's been really sweet. Thank you, everybody who attended. Thank you very much, Stephen, for being so great to do this with. You know what I mean?
You too, man. This is always fun.
So thanks, everyone. I think we're trying to make this kind of a cool regular thing at RG's, I guess. It's please go to the relentlessgeekery.com website, and we have quite the interesting accumulation of this kind of humor and information, and I don't know, the joy of geekery. We really have had a nice time doing it. And then
it's kind of like sitting around at a table at an RG every week.
It really is. The conversation rages far, and people are out like pulling their phones out and taking notes. I got to listen to that. I got to read that. I got to go there. I love when Mensons share those cool things with me. I have so many things have I gained from, tell me about the book you're reading that unless you told me about it, I wouldn't know about it, but it's great. Yeah. And I love those kinds of recommendations, that kind of thing. So, okay. Thank you again for the haiku, Colleen. You are the poet laureate of Relentless Geekery.
We'll have to hire her to come out with like yearly haikus.
Exactly. We're going to have like a t-shirt series. You know what I mean? We need to
haiku series. Oh, I love that.
By the way,
haiku series.
Here's the geekiest thing. I will show a little bit of love right now. Colleen got me this cool puzzle. I think I mentioned it online.
Oh yeah.
So it's you can see that right now, I think March 26th is showing in those two little gaps. It's a set of pentominoes that for the top two rows are all the months of the year, and the bottom four rows are all the dates of each month. And you can solve this puzzle for every single date throughout the year. And so since I've gotten it, I've managed to, I think I've only had one day where it escaped me, but otherwise I've managed to apply myself to a little bit of puzzle solving.
That's pretty cool.
It's now my daily, don't always be computing, don't always be talking, do something that is this kind of brain fun. And every day I do it. So thank you, Colleen, for this wonderful gift.
That's pretty cool. I like that.
Okay. Enjoy the rest of the RG, everyone. Thank you, everyone in Dayton, for putting on another virtual RG.
Yes.
Anybody who would be interested in a comic book perspective on this, please join me tomorrow at, I think, 1:30. And otherwise, relax and, whatever your beverage of choice is, a little sip. Here's my Dr. Pepper, my hideous addiction. So, all right. We will see you again, Stephen.
Guys.
Okay.
Bye, guys.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
You have been listening to the Relentless Geekery podcast. Come back next week and join Alan and Stephen's conversation on geek topics of the week.